The intention of tonight's talk is to give those of you who are practicing some more information so that you will understand more about your practice. In our being, mind and matter are occurring together all the time, every second of the time. The mind is that which knows. Matter doesn't know, but it is known. An analogy for how they work together is an analogy about how a blind man and a crippled man can work together in order to go somewhere. The blind man can't see. He can't go anywhere on his own. If he wants to go somewhere, he needs the help of something else. But the crippled man, the man who is lame, he can't walk. And he also can't go anywhere without some help. But if the two of them get together, and the crippled man climbs on top of the blind man's shoulders, then he can guide the blind man where to walk. He can't walk on his own, but he can get together with the blind man, and together they can go together. And this is how our mind and body work together all the time. The mind can't arise without an object. If there's no object, the mind will not arise. It doesn't arise all the time. It only arises when it has an object. So how do mind and matter occur in our life? In the moment of seeing, there is an eye base. That is not the physical eye, but within the eye, the part of the eye that can receive the visible object or light. And this is physical. Then there's the visible object. And this comes in contact with the eye. You can say it strikes the eye. It strikes that eye base. And because of the contact, the striking of the visible object on the eye base, then there's a spark. There's seeing consciousness. The mind knows the visible object. And together with the mind, there's contact, called phassa, in P-H-A-S-S-A in Pali. That is the contact between the mind and the object at the eye base. And there's also, due to contact, there's feeling, good or bad. If it's a likable object, then there's a pleasant feeling. If it's a disagreeable object, then there's an unpleasant feeling. If we put our attention to seeing when it happens, right, when it arises, these are the components that can become apparent to us. These are ultimate reality. We have to observe seeing as a whole when it happens. If we don't observe it as a whole, we won't see these parts that are our reality. Instead, we'll think, I am seeing. I am seeing. And this object is here all the time. This sight is here all the time. It's permanent. We'll think that I am seeing all the time also. So it's necessary to observe at the moment of seeing. Observe the process so that we can see what really happens, the mind and matter that really exist at that moment. It's the same at the moment of hearing. There's the ear base within the physical ear that is capable of receiving sound. In hearing, there's an audible object. The sound waves strike the ear base. And when that happens, there's hearing consciousness that arises. The mind knows the sound. The mind arises with sound as its object. And in addition to the hearing consciousness, there's the contact between the mind and the sound at the ear base. There's the sense of contact. And there's also, because of the contact, there's feeling, the sense of being pleasant or unpleasant. If it's a sound that is to our liking, then there's a pleasant feeling. It feels good to hear. If the sound is not to our liking, then it feels bad to hear. It's unpleasant. When hearing happens, if we put our attention at the ear and note it right when it happens, hearing, the mind can become aware of these components. You won't know all of them all at the same time. But when the concentration and mindfulness are good, it will become aware of either the sound that is striking the ear again and again. It will become aware of the ear base that arises in each moment. It will become aware of the hearing consciousness that arises due to the contact of the sound with the ear, the sense of being pleasant or unpleasant, the sense of contact between the mind and the object. All these things are things that are apparent, can become apparent in the moment of hearing when we observe it right when it happens. It happens similarly in the case of smelling. Within the nose, there are receptors for smell. And when there's an odor, whether it's fragrant or foul, that is carried by the air and comes into the nostrils, strikes the nose base, then there's smelling consciousness that arises like a spark. And the mind knows the odor. There's the sense of contact between the mind and the odor at the nose base. And also there's feeling that arises due to contact, feeling good or bad. When it's something fragrant or to our liking, the feeling will be pleasant. If it's disagreeable, it will be unpleasant to smell. It won't feel good to smell. And if it's neither, then there may be a neutral feeling also. When smelling occurs, it occurs at the nostrils, at the nose base. We put our attention there at the moment it happens to note it, smelling. And when we do this, if our concentration is strong enough, we will see the parts, one or another of these parts, that all come together to create the event of smelling. It's similar with tasting. On the tongue base, there are receptors for taste, whether it's sweet or hot or salty, bitter, astringent, or sour. When we have a piece of food in the mouth and we chew the food, as we chew, the flavor mixes with saliva on the tongue and the mind knows the taste. Taste consciousness arises, and this consciousness arises with something tasteable as its object. And at the same time there is also the contact of the mind and the gustatory object at the tongue base. And due to contact there's feeling, good or bad. A likable taste or a disagreeable taste will bring accordingly will bring a certain feeling. It's similar with touch. Touch happens on the body base. Throughout the body, all the areas where there is moisture is sensitive to tangible objects. So the only parts of the body where we can't experience a tangible object are the areas that are completely dry, like the nails, fingernails and toenails, or the hair. Those areas are not sensitive. But everywhere else, when a tangible object strikes the body base anywhere, either from outside or from within, then touch consciousness arises, and the mind knows the tangible object. Together with this, there's the contact between the mind and the tangible object at the body base. Due to contact, there's feeling good or bad. If it's an agreeable touch, then there's a pleasant feeling. If it's a disagreeable touch, then it's an unpleasant feeling. We should understand that the mind cannot arise without an object. It needs an object just the way some elderly people need a walking stick. to hold on to for support. And in these processes that I've mentioned, there's both physical, the sense base, and the object. These are physical. The consciousness, contact, and feeling, these are mind. So there's both mental and physical processes coming together in the moments of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking as well. And in also the processes of thinking or imagining, reflecting, and so on. There is the sense base and the object. The sense base is the mind door. And there are objects. It's as though something is seen, as though something is being heard, as though being smelled, tasted, or touched. It's not actually seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. But these objects also occur in the mind. They strike the mind door, which is a certain type of consciousness, the Bhavanga consciousness. And when these objects, Dhamma objects, you can call them, when they strike the mind door, then the mind knows that image, for example. Images, sometimes people have images arise in the mind. This is a process that involves Dhamma object and the mind door. So the mind knows the image, or it knows the thought, or it knows the memory or imagination. So this consciousness that knows this Dhamma object arises, and together there's the sense of contact. The knowing mind and the Dhamma object meet, and because of the contact, there's feeling, good or bad, a sense of being pleasant or unpleasant, if the object is agreeable or disagreeable. So we should understand that this is the theory, and when we practice, of course, we know it, come to know it for ourselves. But the yogis, when they practice, should understand that mind and matter occur together at all these instances: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. Well, when seeing happens, we should observe it as a whole. Seeing. And we can't our noting won't be effective unless we just observe the process as a whole when it happens. The principle in Vipassana is to start the practice by observing what is apparent. So what is apparent is the seeing process. It is said in Pali, Yata Pakatang Vipassana Biniveso, to begin Vipassana practice by observing the apparent object. What is apparent is seeing. It's not realistic to try to select out any one of these parts and focus on it, such as I, or form, or seeing consciousness. The way we come to see these parts is by observing the whole. But by putting the attention on the whole, inevitably what will happen is one part will stand out. The other parts are also present. So these parts occur, they come together, and the process of seeing happens. And it's only at that moment that we can see how it happens. So it's important to try to observe things right at the very moment. The mind and matter that occur in our being are arising and passing away very, very quickly. So if we want to see it as it really is, we have to slow down a bit from our normal pace. We have to go at a somewhat slower pace, because otherwise the mind cannot catch up with the mind-matter processes that are happening. There are many, many things that happen when we stand up from a sitting, when we go from standing to walking, when we finish walking and we come to a standing again, when we stand and then sit down, when we sit down and then go into a lying posture, when we go from lying into sitting up. All these big changes in our posture are times when many, many things happen, and it's important to observe at these times. We should just do one thing at a time. If we take an interest in looking at the things around us, listening to the sounds of the birds and so on, deliberately focusing on these things, it's going to be hard to keep your mind happy with looking inside at your own phenomena. If we want to see the process of seeing when it happens, then it's important to behave as though we're blind. When seeing happens, don't take any interest in what is being seen. Just try to note the process. What I mean by that is when you happen to see something, it's not a time when you're deliberately needing to look. When you're getting yourself the food, you need to look at the food and see what it is and scoop it and so on. But when something happens to strike your eye, that's what I mean by, at that time, just go for the process and not the content. Try to observe seeing as a process, and don't, if you have to note it when it happens. Otherwise the mind will respond. It's a good object, I like it. It's a bad object, I don't like it. Oh, how pleasant, I want to hear it again. I want to see it again. Oh, how unpleasant, I hope I don't see it again. So following on the liking, there will be craving. Following on disliking, there will be anger. So it's important to observe things when they happen, to see them before liking, before craving happens. It's the same with hearing. When you happen to hear something, it's even though you've heard it perfectly well, just observe the process. No need to get involved in what made the sound. One should be as though deaf, even though one has ears to hear. And even though one has wisdom, intelligence, knows how to do things in the world, one with wisdom should behave as though one doesn't know anything at all. In the practice we're trying to learn, so it's helpful to take the attitude of being a beginner. If we keep on remembering how much we already know, our previous experience, or what we've read, or what we know how to do in the world, we might not want to listen to what the teacher says. So that's why it's helpful to just put aside what you've already accumulated as knowledge and treat yourself as a beginner. Although you have strength, are perfectly healthy, strong, you should behave as though you're weak. That means when you're moving about, you shouldn't use all your energy, all your strength, all your agility, all your speed. You should go slower than normal so that you can, as I mentioned, so that your mind can start to catch up with the mind that arises and passes away 17 trillion mind moments per second. You have to try to slow down in order for your mind to have a chance to catch up with the mental and physical phenomena that are occurring. If you already know what I'm talking about, you don't need to listen to this talk. But if you have heard it before, sometimes it's good to listen again. Anyhow, there are many similes for how to slow down, how to treat the practice, how to maintain mindfulness. If we think about this retreat is a very short period of time. So here we're trying to learn how to practice meditation. People with some experience are trying to help you to the extent that we understand. Think about how many years you went to school to get an education. You couldn't learn everything all at once. you had to take 1 year after another, and you had to go step by step. First you start out with kindergarten or nursery school, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. You spend 8 years in the primary levels, 4 years in secondary school, and then how many years in college. So we take a long time to gain our education. So we should be a little bit patient with this retreat. Okay, so what I mean by that is that, here we're asked to slow down a bit and to try to pay attention to our own internal processes so that we can come to see things the way they really are and gain knowledge that brings peace and freedom. So we come here because we can't do this so easily at home. Of course, we want to know how to be mindful in our daily life, but we come to a place like this because it provides a setting for us to learn in a way that is not easy to do when we're at home. So although you go back to your daily life and you live at a normal speed, you don't cross the road at a snail's pace, of course, you have to live like that in the world. But in this setting, we can create. In this setting, we have the opportunity to develop effort, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. So this is what this setting is for. And I'd like to close by asking if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask. And in addition, I would like to say if anyone has any difficulty that they would like to discuss, I will be able to talk with you after this in the library. So when there's the mental intention to walk slowly, we walk slowly. When there's the mental intention to walk quickly, we walk quickly. It's because of that mental intention that you slow down. It's not because of observing. It's because there's the intention that happens.
Is it the same for the feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling?
What do you mean by that?
When I smell something, I can say, okay, I don't like that odor.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I can just say, okay, it's like just an odor.
It's right. It is just an odor. Yeah, and if we catch it when it happens, then there's less of the I don't like it, and more of an odor. Mm-hmm. No. So that's the direction we want to be heading in.